Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Want to start off by wishing everyone a happy holiday season, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year, Happy Festivus, Happy and Merry, whatever you happen to be celebrating. Hope you enjoy the holidays, spend some time with family and friends, and spend some time watching old school sports. Hope you have some time to do that also. Would sincerely appreciate anyone who hasn't subscribed. If you subscribe, like the videos, comment down below and let us know what you're thinking. Always appreciate the interaction and the thoughts of our viewers. Definitely help make me better at these games, give me things to think about, learn something every time there's a comment. So totally appreciate the engagement and hope it continues in 2023. Thinking about the Pirates, though, we are at the beginning of 2046 free agency, and through the arbitration period and award season, made a couple of big changes. First and foremost was making a trade for Lupe Zelaya, who will become definitely our starting DH, possibly our starting first baseman. The only concern I have about playing him at first base is that he's pretty miserable defensively. But he is a 28, soon to be 29-year-old who has a pretty strong major league bat with a 136 OPS plus and WRC plus over the course of his career. Can see the last 4 seasons hit at least 25 homers a year for the Phillies. He's a left-handed bat who should help our offense. To pick him up, we had to give up some pretty significant players and some pretty big-time prospects. Notably, first baseman Luis Flores and third baseman Willie Madrano, who were both due to make some pretty big money in arbitration, as well as 3 prospects, Zamora, Renteria, and Pietri. Pietri and Renteria are the 2 best of those prospects. But felt that moving on from those players to save some money to bring on Zelaya's bat made sense given the offensive woes of the Pirates in recent seasons. And the other big move we made during the arbitration period was trading away a longtime closer Rios, who was due to make close to $17 million in arbitration. Just felt that we could not afford him anymore. So moved on from him. Other than that, though, not a ton of changes. Bringing back most of our players. We did re-sign Luis Longoria, our fragile ace, to his final arbitration eligible contract. He'll be a free agent after this season. Hard to imagine that we will have him back. But we will have Longoria back, heading up the top of the rotation with Sean Street next year. Bobby Gonzalez, we exercised a player option on him. And then the youngsters Alex Arroyo and Sal Valadez are likely to round out the rotation next year. So still expect our pitching to be excellent next season. The question is what we can do with the lineup. Is there someone else we can add in addition to Lupe Zelaya to give us some more offense? We will have Danny Calez up for the full year next year. He's a guy who hit pretty well, 12 home runs and 165 at-bats when we brought him up last year. Another left-handed bat to hopefully balance out our lineup. So now with Zelaya, Gonzalez, and Calez, as well as the switch-hitting Arellano, feel like we've got the opportunity to hopefully have a bit more balanced lineup. Have made a couple of minor trades since, well, not really minor trades. One of them's a significant trade since the last episode. We'll update you on those right now. First and foremost was trading away Alex Rojas, who we tempted fate with, and fate burned us. We offered him a qualifying offer as he was looking for $22 million a year over 3 years, supposedly, hoping to get the draft pick, and he accepted that qualifying offer for $18.9 million. Clearly a very good starting pitcher, but given the strength we have in starters and the budgetary constraints we're under, did not want to be spending close to $19 million a year on him. So we traded him away, and we actually got some cash in return in addition to Alfredo Servin, who is a back end of the rotation potential kind of pitcher. Probably more likely, honestly, a middle reliever with our team. But he's durable. He's only 23 years old. Probably will start the year in AAA. But a guy who could contribute to the back end of our bullpen over the next couple of years. So at least we got something out of having Rojas. And then we also traded Danny Loya and Felix Bath, two players who were making the major league minimum but were out of options and didn't really, I think, have a role on our team. We've got a lot of good young outfielders. Loya, I just don't think fits. And Felix Bath is a fifth starter, last guy out of the bullpen, middle reliever type. Again, we didn't have options for these guys, so we were going to have to waive and DFA them, hope that nobody picked them up to get them back to AAA coming out of camp, and just felt that they were not worth the $1.4 million we were going to be guaranteeing to both of them this year by having them on the 40-man roster with major league contracts. So we got a tiny bit of cash in return, as well as a shortstop, Isaiah Hodges. Good fielder, good personality. Never going to be a major league hitter, but just the type of player that we like to have across our farm system, our minor league organization, with a good personality to influence the real prospects, good defense to help our pitchers out and help us hopefully win games. Not a big-time prospect, certainly. They got two players who could contribute at the major league level. But between moving on from Rojas, Loya, and Bath, that does put us in a much better position as far as our financials than we were. Obviously, the move on from Rios and the big money helped there too, as well as the arbitration-eligible players that we moved on from in terms of Flores and Medrano also. But you can see we bumped our scouting and development budgets close to where we were a year ago. And we also have player development with enough in the draft, hopefully, opportunity to hopefully bring on an international amateur free agent. And we still have got about $15 million to spend on free agents right now. Now, I don't know that there's anyone in free agency that we're going to be able to get for that amount who's going to be a truly impactful player, but I am going to look to see if perhaps we can take on a contract of somebody who may be able to give us a little more offense. Pretty pleased with our pitching right now. Don't think we need to make a lot of changes there. But certainly another bat may help rejuvenate and spark this offense to hopefully be better than 10th in the league in runs scored, which is where we were last season. And taking a look at the free agent hitters who are available, obviously a lot of pretty expensive people at the top end of the market. I am intrigued by Yoshitaro Nakahara, who's a player who came over from Japan a few seasons ago. You can see he's hit 31, 24, and 29 homers in 3 years with the Padres. Not a great batting average player, just a .237 hitter, and he also doesn't walk an extreme amount. He does strike out an extreme amount, but he is a left-handed hitter who still looks like he can be a pretty useful bat against right-handers, and he's only looking for $2.6 million. Now, he would be a fourth or fifth outfielder for us, which he's probably not going to love, but he's competent defensively. You know, he could play any position out there, although we'd have to train him a bit in spring training to get him competent in center field or right field. But I think he's certainly capable of doing that. Got a high work ethic. He is wrecked physically, but as another bat, particularly against right-handers and some organizational depth, I think he's one of the more interesting opportunities out there for a team like the Pirates, just because as of right now, he's not looking for a ton of money. So we are going to actually offer him exactly what he's looking for, which I don't normally do. Normally, I'm always trying to save some money, but I do worry a little bit with a player like him could end up lingering on the market for a while, trying to get people into the bidding war. So I'm hoping that maybe if we just meet his demand, which includes being in the starting lineup. So I'm going to lie to him. Little secret between me and you. I don't normally lie about promised roles to people because I just don't like to deal with the anger and the morale issues and the angst when that playing time doesn't materialize. But I want to get him on board, or at least make an attempt to get him on board as efficiently and quickly as possible. So we're going to give him everything that he's looking for, meet his demand, submit an offer to him, and see what happens with Uncle Nakahara. And now, with 13 million-ish to spend after the offer to Nakahara, clearly not going to be competing for any of the top free agents. Mike Augustini, we had him on the team for the end of last season. He's a future Hall of Famer looking for big money still at this point. We'll take a hit to fan interest when he leaves. We're willing to deal with that. Gilberto Cano would be a very small upgrade at catcher offensively, would be an actual downgrade defensively, I think. So for a 250 hitter who hit 16 homers last year, not going to be chasing a $13 million contract with Cano. The other guy we could potentially afford is Esteban Montemayor. Good defender, respectable hitter for a shortstop, but he's wrecked physically at the age of 28. And you may remember that we did trade in our previous episode during the arbitration period for shortstop Luis Linares. We got him in that deal for Ricky Rios, our closer, and we had to actually include some prospects to get him also. But we got his former team, the Cubs, to retain a huge amount. Well, not a huge, a huge amount of his contract. Actually, 85% is a huge amount of that contract. But we gave them Rios and a number of really good prospects to bring him on board to potentially be a starting shortstop for us a season or two, and then perhaps a utility infielder. And since we're only paying him $3.3 million with the amount of the contract that we had to pay, willing to live with the fact that he's not an incredible hitter at this point. He is fragile, but think that a player like him on the roster now certainly makes no rational reason at all for us to chase somebody like Montemayor for over $11 million when we've got Linares on the roster. So I don't see anyone else in free agency as far as a bat that's really going to be a difference maker for us. And as I mentioned, I'm pretty happy with what our pitching staff looks like right now. I mentioned the 5 starters in our rotation earlier that I think are going to be pretty solid. And that is not even including the fact that we have Devin Smith, who we drafted in the 6th round a year and a half ago, who looks like he's about ready to contribute at the major league level. So feel like we don't need to chase after pitching right now, and we can use the rest of the money we have to maybe bring on someone through a trade who can help this team achieve our goals next year, which is hopefully getting past the NLCS and into a World Series, which we'd like to win if we get there, by the way, just to be clear. So we've been searching for some trades, and not shockingly, there's a lot of players making huge money that we can't afford that we might be able to trade for. And there's a lot of players that aren't that great that we can trade for. But I have kind of found maybe something to do on the catcher front. And you can see the search here where I'm searching for good defense and close to competent offense. And our current catcher, Nelson Ibarra, actually even shows up on this list. But he's been a pretty unproductive offensive player over the course of his career with a 64 OPS plus, 62 WRC plus. And he's basically been right at those levels here with us in Pittsburgh. And over 162 games, he kind of averages being a replacement level player. So His offense is not good. His defense is really good. He's durable. He's out there every day. But I look at Andres Coronel from the Cubs, who's just as good defensively and might even have a better arm, also is durable, has a better batting profile, and most importantly, has been a much more productive offensive player over the course of his career with a 92 OPS plus, a 91 WRC plus. So I think he would be an upgrade. Now the issue is that he's making a lot more money than Ibarra at $11 million this coming year, and then over $13 million for the next couple seasons. But we could afford to bring him on. As I said, he's overall a little better defensively because of the great arm. They're both durable. He's a little better offensively, and he's also a year younger than Ibarra. So it's not a huge upgrade, but I think it is definitely an upgrade at catcher if we can pull that off. The question is how much we're going to have to offer them to get the deal done, and how much of the contract can we potentially get them to retain to make it a little more palatable for Mr. Nutting. And you see, our bar is straight up for Coronel. We're close, but then they want a pretty big-time player or big-time prospect to go with Ibarra. And we're just going to have to figure out whether that's worth it to us or not. And I've got a deal together. I don't know that we should do this deal, but I do have a deal together. We have to include a lot of other players, and we're actually including cash. We're including all the cash that we got when we traded away Rojas. So kind of a weird situation for the Pirates to be putting cash into a deal. But we're trying to get them to retain as much of his contract at all, because this $4.6 million in cash kind of helps us this year. But then it all goes into Mr. Nutting's pockets. Whereas if we can get them, we can put some cash into a deal and get them to keep a little more for the 3 years of the contract. We're kind of spreading this cash out a little bit over time in terms of our budget. So I don't mind that part of it. Question is whether we're giving up too much for a small upgrade at catcher. Although I guess, a 90 WRC plus versus a low 60s WRC plus is not necessarily a minor upgrade, because when we do look at Coronel, he's kind of averaged a 2 WAR over every 162 games of his career, as opposed to the 0 WAR that Ibarra has put up. So it makes us a better team, both offensively and defensively, behind the plate. So I think it can be justified, certainly by that perspective. The question is whether we're giving up too much other stuff to get the deal done. Jose Montelopez is a right fielder, not a big-time prospect, a 23-year-old in rookie ball, fine to give him up. Toshiaku Tamba is just a guy who's been in our minor league system for just this past season, a veteran player with a good personality, the type of guy that we have all over our minor league system. Happy to give him up. Ethan Fox hurts a little bit. He is the last remaining piece we have of the ill-fated trade we made 2 or 3 years, or actually more than that at this point, 4 years ago, 4+ years ago at this point, where we traded away Angel Aguilar, who's coming off of an MVP season in the American League. And we traded away him for Jose Montoya, who we thought was going to be a starting pitcher, ended up just being a very good reliever who we have moved on from now, as well as Ethan Fox, who we thought could be a replacement level kind of third baseman, maybe a little better than that. And he's really just been a utility infielder for us. But it'll make it easier for us not to think about the Aguilar transaction if Fox is gone. And I think we've got enough good young infielders coming up who can help us that we can do without Fox as a utility infielder this year. We've got other people that can fill that role. So fine including him. The issue is Oscar Tapete, who was our second round pick just a year and a half ago. Starting pitching prospect, has not done much in rookie ball so far, but he's also only 20 years old. Still is a guy who potentially has a 5 or 6 pitch arsenal and looks like he could be a very competent major league pitcher. So I don't love giving him up, but we're a team that's trying to win right now, and Tapete is probably 3 or 4 years away from being able to contribute. The question with Tapete, is he a 5th starter or is he a 3rd starter? If he ends up being a 5th starter, I've got no problem including him in the deal. If he ends up being a 3rd starter, I'll feel a little worse about it. But we're trying to win now, and he's not going to help us now. So the way I look at it, we've got a replacement for Ethan Fox in terms of a utility infielder, and we're upgrading our starting catcher. Don't care about Tamba. Don't care about Manta Lopez. The issue is we're giving up some prized cash. You can see you can't see this, but without the cash, we can get them to keep 30% of his salary. Without all of that cash, we add in a little more. We get it to 35. We put it up to the $4.6 million that we got in the trade for Rojas, and then we can get it up to 40%. So the only thing I care about is giving up the cash and giving up Tapete. And as I talked about, I'm trying to win now with this Pirates team. We're in the 10th year of this playthrough, starting the 10th season of this playthrough. We've been to the playoffs 7 of 9 years. We just went to the NLCS. We've proven we can build a pretty consistent winner on a shoestring budget in Pittsburgh. I'm trying to get us over the hump to get to a World Series championship. And for next year, in the next few years, we're better with Coronel at catcher than we are with Ibarra. There's part of me that wants to try to get greedy and bump it up to 45% that they retain and see what they think. There is the risk that we just blow up the deal entirely by doing that. I've certainly done that in the past, just trying to get that last 5% of retention. I do think that with players like Tapete and Fox in there and the cash that they're getting, it's something they would have to think about. And I also don't see this being such a slam dunk for us that we just have to do it. The thing is, if they don't do it and they come back to us, this deal is not going to get it done. So we're going to end up having to bring on Coronel, where they retain a lot less of his money, or we're going to have to give up, Ibarra and Tapete, and then some even better players. So that's the fair of it. Is it worth blowing up the deal for potentially, $600,000 this year that they're keeping and $700,000 each of the next 2 years? The $5.3 million on Coronel, I think he's due to make $13.3. So that means we're going to be spending $8 million on him in 2048 and 2049. So he's definitely going to be fully priced as a really good defensive catcher who's a competent major league hitter. We're going to be spending some money at catcher. Not that this should be a factor, but is he popular? He is extremely popular locally for some reason, and popular nationally. So it'll give us a little boost to fan interest, and nobody cares about Ibarra. So that's a little bit positive, because we did lose a couple points in fan interest when we traded away Rojas. I think I'm not going to mess around. I'm just going to do the deal that's in front of us, not quibble over saving $700,000 each of the next couple seasons. Actually, saving about $700,000 for the coming 3 seasons, a little less this next year coming up. But we're upgrading our catcher for this year, both offensively and a little bit defensively. We've got a replacement for Fox as a utility infielder, and it makes it less likely that I'm going to be thinking about Aguilar and feeling bad about that. So it's good for my mental health too. And we'll see what Tapete becomes. we're going to go ahead and complete the trade. And with that, I'm guessing that's our big activity for this free agent period, even though it's only November 21st and free agency really hasn't even started yet. Fans happy that we brought Coronel on board. Who gives us a 3-point boost in fan interest. So I think we're even better now than we were when we traded away Mr. Rojas, because I think we got a 2-point decline when we traded him away. Now, clearly, we'll be losing some other players in free agency. So we'll take some more fan interest hits from that. But that uses up most of our money for this offseason. But we've upgraded at catcher. We've gotten younger at catcher. And we're still waiting to hear what happens with Nakahara, which would kind of be a 4th or 5th outfielder for us, another left-handed bat. And that would kind of round out, I think, what we need to do with this roster. We don't have a ton of changes we need to make. And at this point, we don't have a ton of money to make changes even if we wanted to. And we had, at the end of the last episode, made a minor league free agent offer to one of the international free agents. Israel Muniz felt like he could be a depth catcher for us in the minor league system. Apparently he's got offers from the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs that he is much more excited about. So given that he's not a difference maker, we will let him move on. Still have not heard anything back yet from what Mr. Nakahara is thinking, but we'll see what happens on that front. And here in early December, we've got some good news and we've got some horrible news. Nakahara likes our contract offer, which is good. But Juan Castillo, the budding young star who we picked up in the trade for Isaiah Hill and just signed to a long extension, has returned from India from seeing a famous guru, and it seems to have had a negative impact on him, and he's rethinking his priorities and whether baseball is the most important thing in his life. Clearly would be a huge hit to lose him. Having him on board is part of the reason why we were able to move on from Medrano and Flores in arbitration this year. And we, of course, turned the two of them into Zelaya with some big prospects also. But Castillo had a great year for us, 282 average, 24 home runs, very good defensively. Have him penciled in as our starting second baseman is a guy who we thought we could potentially move to short if we needed to. Hopefully, I agree with this anonymous member of our front office. Hope he won't spend more time meditating than he will in the batting cage, but we'll see if there's any decisions on him going forward. But clearly hope that this does not have a significant negative impact on Castillo's career, because I feel like with the addition of Coronel as catcher and Zelaya as a DH/first baseman, we've helped our offense already this offseason. Bringing on Nakahara would also help and really, I think, help move the team forward as far as the number of runs we can score. But if we lose Castillo, a lot of the progress that I think we've made is gone. So let's hope that Mr. Castillo doesn't go finding inner peace away from a batting cage. And the winter meetings are going on, so we've got to kind of figure out what we want to do with our ticket prices. I do feel like we're going to be taking some hits in fan interest when we lose some of the guys who have been on our team and our free agents. We already talked about on the batting side, Augustini, who we had with us for the last couple months of last season. Victor Vivar is another similar situation. Tony Cota is our former starting shortstop. The departures of any of those guys probably going to cause us some issues. So our fan interest is definitely going to be lower than it appears right now when we get to the regular season. That said, even at $26, we were selling out at the end of last year Granted, we were in a great race for the playoffs, and we were making the playoffs for a sixth straight season. But I think we're going to be competitive again this year, particularly if we can avoid Castillo going off and joining a commune. There's part of me that just wants to keep it right here and see how we do. There's part of me that thinks we should cut it back a little bit because fan interest could likely be in the mid 80s when we get through this off season. So I'm going to hedge, compromise, wimp out, however you want to describe it. We'll cut ticket prices just slightly to $25. Still going to be well above the average ticket price we had last season that we generally sold out with, in hope that we can still sell a good chunk of season tickets, hopefully have the fans in the stadium pretty packed most days. And if we can do that, then, we're still going to be generating more revenue than we did a year ago, with a 15.4% increase to our average ticket price from last season. And if we need to raise it during the season, we're playing well, fan interest is high, we can do that. But I do think that fan interest is going to move against us over the next couple of months, as some of those players that I mentioned, and probably some players that I didn't mention, even sign with other teams. And we've got the Rule 5 draft coming up in less than a week. You can see we've only got 29 players on the 40-man roster right now, so we've certainly got opportunity to add some players in the Rule 5 draft. Also want to see if there's any of our Rule 5 eligible guys that we want to put on the roster. I don't feel like we've got any huge prospects this year, but I don't know why I would say by the same token, because I'm kind of changing. It seems like that's the way that I speak, which is probably incorrect. But it seems like I'm pivoting, maybe not a full 180 degrees, and I'm saying same token, or tried to say same token, which doesn't seem like the right way to be speaking. So although none of these players are big-time prospects, we do have room on the 40-man roster. Itri Kusulu, guy who's only gotten as far as AA ball, not the greatest personality in the world, but he does look like he can be a competent major league reliever, a ground ball pitcher who throws in the mid to high 90s. I don't know if we'd lose him or not, but won't take the risk. We'll get him onto the 40-man to protect him. Mike Sabalos, kind of a similar situation, 22 years old, spent last year in AA ball, good personality, power pitcher, throws in the mid to high 90s. Again, he looks like he is just a bullpen arm. Maybe in a best scenario, he's a good bullpen arm. But given that we've lost some pitchers and are in the process of losing some pitchers, we'll protect him. Again, I don't think he's a huge prospect, a huge player that we can't afford to move on from. Jose Funes, with the low movement and the low control, and the fact that he's already 23 years old. If someone wants to keep him on the roster, they can. Luis Gonzalez, not going to protect him either. He's almost 23. Question whether the stuff and control are ever going to be good enough. Just looking at the guys with a little more potential now. Jeremiah Hicks, don't love the movement, don't love the control. Don't think there's anyone else we need to protect. So if we lose a guy, we lose a guy. But we do have opportunity to maybe add a player or two who can help the back end of our roster in the Rule 5 draft, particularly if we don't end up getting Nakahara signed. That would definitely leave us with a role for a fifth outfielder or a utility infielder who maybe has some upside that someone else lets go for whatever reason. But we'll find out what happens in that in about a week. And we're still also anxiously awaiting to hear if we hear any more about Juan Castillo's outlook on baseball. And we did get Nakahara signed. So I think that what we did made sense. I did feel like he wasn't going to get us into a huge bidding war as a 33-year-old who's wrecked physically, but he does have a good left-handed bat that I think can help us coming off the bench. So paying the full 2.6 million was not an extreme contract. I think he's the first player that I've actually ever lied to, in at least in this playthrough, and said, hey, you're going to be a starter for us, even though I have no intention of him being a starter. But we've got Nakahara on board. We've got Coronel at catcher. I feel like those are our big moves for this offseason, which is good since I don't have a ton of money to spend. But fan interest at 100, I think that's the first time we've ever hit triple digits with these Pirates. I don't think it's going to stay there for long as we start losing some of the players who were with us last year to free agency. But still nice to see that closing in on 10 years into this playthrough, we finally have gotten fan interest to a pretty favorable level. And you can see with the small dip in ticket prices we made from where we ended the season, still on pace to sell almost as many season tickets as last year. But I do think as fan interest dips over the coming weeks when some of those free agents are signed away from us, the projections for season tickets will drop a little bit. But right now we're scheduled, or better said, projected to make a lot more revenue per game next year than we made this past season. And if, even if we get up to 900,000 a game, that would still be good progress. Hopefully give us an opportunity to keep the budget moving in a better direction. So I like our team on the field. I think our pitching is still really good, even though we've lost Rios and traded away Rojas. And I think our offense is going to be better with the additions of Coronel, Zelaya, and now Nakahara. I think we've got some better bats now too. And we've got Linares to stabilize our position at shortstop, give us a great glove for a utility infielder down the line. I feel like we've made moves that are going to help this team. So I'm feeling optimistic right now here on December 22nd, 2046. Let's hope that nothing funky happens with Mr. Castillo from visiting that guru in India, though. That's what I'm stressing about right now. And we've made it to the Rule 5 draft after a really good regular season and a really nice postseason run, although it wasn't as long as we would have liked. We're picking 26th, so not sure what type of talent there's going to be available for us. Steve Valadares picked away from us, veteran left fielder, 33-year-old, was a guy that we had at AAA last year. Did hit .319 with 6 home runs, but not that great defensively. And although he makes pretty good contact and has some speed, was not a player that had a big role on our team. Definitely feel better with the likes of Calez and Nakahara as potentially our 4th and 5th outfielders than Valadares, and weren't going to guarantee a major league contract to him. So we'll see whether Detroit can hold on to him for the whole year or they send him back to us. But Valadares is gone. And are we up to our pick yet? Yes, we are. So scouting director doesn't think that we should do anything. We're going to obviously take a look through and see whether or not we agree with that. And there's not a lot in the Rule 5 draft this year. I'm a little intrigued by Alex Contreras, soon to be 28-year-old, making $1.7 million for the Padres. Issue, obviously, is he's out with a torn flexor tendon in his elbow for 6 months, and he's fragile in terms of his injury proneness. So he's a guy that would not be able to do anything for us until the All-Star break. But he is a 28-year-old who throws in the high 90s. Good stuff, good movement, acceptable control, nice fastball, nice splitter. And when you look at what he's done at the major league level, he's been a pretty productive pitcher. He's only pitched 72 and a third innings, but he's given up 57 hits, struck out 71 batters, 3.36 ERA. And it seems like he probably struggled a bit as a starter with San Diego. I'm guessing that his ERA as a starter back in 2043 was a lot higher than his ERA when he was coming out of the bullpen. So he's like a decent pitcher that's not making a ton of money. I just don't know what he's going to look like already being fragile, coming off of this serious injury that's going to keep him out for a good year when he is healthy. But we've got the money to bring him on board. Do we just stash him on the 60-day IL and see what he looks like? And kind of get a free option at him June, July of next year to put him on a rehab assignment in AAA. See if he's still any good. And then either bring him up to the majors if we've had some injuries, or he's in his last option year, so we could theoretically keep him in AAA. I think he's just kind of an insurance policy for our bullpen, and I know it's weird to be saying someone coming off of a huge injury is an insurance policy, but it's kind of a cheap lottery ticket that could become a useful arm for our bullpen if we do have some injury issues down the line and he heals up fine. There's just not a lot else out there in this Rule 5 draft. I looked at some of the higher potential players, was a little intrigued by Rowan Bryce as a fifth outfielder, but don't love the personality, don't love the defense. And with the fact that, as we talked about, we've got Kelez and Nakahara as backup outfielders now behind Gonzalez in left, Arellano in center, and Ruacho in right. Don't really necessarily have a spot on the team for him. If he had a great personality, if he had some speed, if he was better defensively, would bring him into camp. But also need to keep in mind that with all those outfielders I mentioned, we haven't even talked about guys like Joel Fields yet, who probably is going to play a role for us at the major league level at some point next year too. So I don't feel like we have to chase after Bryce. To me, the question is just what we want to do with Contreras. And I think it's a relatively cheap lottery ticket. Makes it sound like it has too much upside. But I think he could definitely contribute to our bullpen if he's healthy. And I'm willing to invest a little bit of money in him to find out. Because worst case scenario is if we get to spring training and he's got an indefinite recovery time, or everyone in our pitching staff is healthy, we can just send him back. No harm, no foul, no impact on our finances. So we're going to go ahead and draft Mr. Contreras here. And I think that's probably going to be it for us. Scouting director, not recommending anything. I agree with him. We will complete the rest of the draft and take a look at the summary. As we know, lost Valladares. Looks like there was a lot of activity in that first round in the draft. Not too much after that. The A's ended up picking 3 players. But just the one pick for us. We'll see whether Alex Contreras ends up being someone who's healthy enough to contribute for us next year, or do we just send him back to the pods? So now that we're through the Rule 5, the big exciting thing we're going to find out next is whether our former star with the Royals, Bobby Witt Jr., finally gets into the Hall of Fame. We're a little over a week away from finding that out. And after the calendar turns to 2047, we'll know. And after a long wait, is Bobby Witt Jr. a Hall of Famer? And he still is not, and the numbers are moving against him. Juan Soto was elected, Carlos Correa, Jonathan Velasquez, and Bobby Witt Jr., the next 3 in the voting, along with Ronald Acuna Jr. Those were the only 4 players to get over 50% of the vote. but Mr. Witt Jr. will need to wait another year. And after peaking at 67.7% last year, which was the highest he's ever been, he's moved down to 53.6%. So kind of weird Hall of Fame voting here in OOTP. Don't think they've quite perfected that, because a player who's been on the ballot for 6 years, who goes down, up, down, up, down, while always being kind of in the 50 to 65% area, would be a very strange voting pattern in the history of the Baseball Writers Association of America and the Hall of Fame votes. But Bobby Witt Jr. needs to wait at least one more year to be enshrined in Cooperstown. And the preseason's about to begin tomorrow. Still haven't lost any of those free agents that we feared we might. We will lose them eventually, which will impact fan interest, but right now season ticket sales are moving along at a nice rate. Don't have a ton of money for free agents, particularly with the Rule 5 acquisition that we made, but I don't feel like we need to do anything else. I really like this team heading into next season. I'm going to constantly be checking in on Juan Castillo to see if he's going off the rails in terms of his abilities, or he just wants to quit the game, but haven't heard anything about his trip to India for the past several weeks, so hopefully it's something that will ultimately let him come back and be even more focused on playing baseball than he was before, and really contributing, because I mentioned we did sign him to that extension in our previous episode, where we basically paid him a little more than his arbitration number for this upcoming season. We were under his expected arbitration numbers for his age 28 and 29 years. And then we've got the potential to have him on board for 3 years after that in his early 30s. But I don't think it's such a high-priced contract that we can't get out of it if we need to. And also, I think it's something that we could potentially afford if he continues to be a really good defensive second baseman who's hitting similarly to the way that he hit last year. And one of those free agents has finally signed, Victor Vivar, who we brought on at the end of last year. Hit .255 with 5 homers and 110 at-bats. Was a left-handed bat that we felt like we needed. Hopefully with the moves we've made this year, bringing on Zelaya and Nakahara, we're going to be a little less desperate looking for left-handed bats come this trade deadline. But he obviously wasn't with us for a long period of time, and our fan interest must have actually been a little bit over 100, because we're still at 100 even with his departure. So that is not bad. And we're closing in on the start of spring training later this week. Season tickets selling really well. Got to decide on scouting, development, and draft budgets. We're a little over on draft budget. Gives us a little bit of flexibility there with our late first round pick. Scouting and development, we're going to be a little lower than we were last year, but still perfectly acceptable levels, especially for a team like Pittsburgh. Got a little bit of money to spend. Farm system ranks 8th right now. Arroyo, we know, is going to be hopefully in the rotation for us next year. Julio Castillo, not far away, could make the team out of spring training. Other than that, Devin Smith and Jerry Rivera are the 2 other guys that are among our top prospects that could be contributing next year. Smith could make the rotation out of spring training, even though he hasn't pitched in the majors yet. Rivera likely needs a little more seasoning. Was only up in AAA for 21 games last year, although he did hit .348 in those games. But feel that we've got 2 starting pitchers in Arroyo and Smith, and 2 infielders in Castillo and Rivera, who are not far off from being able to help our team at the major league level. So think that pitching should remain a strength, and think that with Castillo and Rivera, hopefully both of those guys can give us a little help with our offense. certainly in spring training, maybe when the season starts at the major league level, and almost certainly at some point over the course of this 2047 season if we do start with several of those players in the minors. And as spring training begins, we're bringing 43 players to camp this year. Going to move to our usual spring training 6-man rotation. That will allow us to see both Devin Smith and Alex Arroyo, two of the youngsters we were talking about, as well as Sal Valadez in the rotation. Plenty of depth in the bullpen, too, for the spring. Get to see a lot of people. Get to see Greg Gaylord back in that closer role for us with the departure of Ricky Rios. Alex Contreras, the Rule 5 pick, we are going to just right now put him onto the 60-day IL. See what happens with him. Likely we'll be keeping him now that he's on the IL. You can see at this point with all those players in camp, don't have any money for free agents, but that will certainly change as we get the roster down from 42 now to 26. So the pitching should be pretty straightforward. Longoria and Street fronting the rotation, Gonzalez in the 3-hole, and then some combination of Arroyo, Smith, and Valadez likely to be our 4th and 5th starters. Really like the rotation again and think that we're going to have a pretty good bullpen once again as well. Have to spend some time thinking about the lineup. You can see we got 24 guys in camp. We'll see what Jan Vasquez wants to do with the crew, but we may make a couple changes to get some people a little extra playing time in spring training and get a hopefully really comprehensive view of what this roster actually looks like and what it potentially could look like a month from now when we're breaking camp and headed north to Pittsburgh. And another one of our expected departures happening here. Tony Cota, shortstop for the past several years for us, gone. Looks like he signed with the Rays only for $2 million. It's a pretty good bargain for them for a good defensive shortstop who's also got a great personality. But we have moved on to Mr. Linares, who we think is a better offensive player. But Cota, obviously an Iron Man. You can see he played 150 games a year for us for 4 straight years and was healthy last year also. We just started giving Castillo a little play at shortstop to keep him hopefully proficient at both positions. Right now, don't see any red flags with Juan Castillo. We're going to be scouting our players throughout spring training, but here in the early stages, doesn't seem like there's any big changes to his personality. Hopefully he doesn't decide to quit right at the end of spring training or something, but hopefully that trip to India will not turn out to be a major issue in the story of his career. And we did also now lose Mike Augustini, another guy who was only with us for a couple of months, and honestly, he only had 13 regular season at-bats for us. He was a bigger part of our postseason roster and hit a couple of big home runs for us as we ran to the NLCS. This, I'm guessing, is going to be the one that has a pretty big impact on our fan interest. You can see only a 4-point hit, even though they said it crashed, so we were well over 100. So it makes me feel pretty good that we're going to get pretty close to that season ticket number that's better than a year ago. Makes me think probably could have been a little more aggressive with prices coming out of the winter, but we can still raise that during the regular season if we need to. And here on March 19th, just got the first real significant injury of spring training. Itri Kasulu, you may remember he's a guy we moved on to the 40-man to keep him from potentially being exposed in the Rule 5 draft. Out for 13 months with a torn UCL. So he was unlikely to make the team. Not going to have a big impact on us for this year, but certainly a disappointment that his season is over. Move him down to Indy. I'm sure they'll be putting him on the IL there. Again, not something that's really going to have an impact on the major league team unless we had a ton of injuries, but certainly unfortunate that we won't get to know a little more about exactly what he might have to offer at the major league level until probably early next season, unfortunately. And now an injury to the wrecked veteran that we picked up in spring training or in the offseason and free agency. Strained rib cage muscle for Nakahara, going to impact him for about 2 weeks. So we're going to be real conservative with him and just put him right on to the 10-day IL. Hopefully we'll have him back early in the regular season. And as we reach the end of spring training, I got a scouting report back on Juan Castillo. Still looks pretty solid, maybe not as good as he used to look, but he's obviously coming off a great season for us. Haven't heard anything additionally about his trip to India and his visit with the guru. So hopefully that means that he's completely focused and ready to contribute to the Pirates in the major leagues here in the upcoming 2047 season. And now that spring training is over, take a look at the Pirates' 12-10 record. Not that that matters all that much. No major injuries, at least to the major league players. Clearly, the loss of Mr. Kasulu is not great for him. Alex Contreras, still the Rule 5 guy. We knew he was injured when we picked him up. And Nakahara looks like he's going to be out for about another week or so. But other than that, everyone on the currently 40-man spring training roster is healthy. So we're not in a bad situation as we prepare for the new season. Just need to figure out what those cuts are going to look like as we get ready for the year. The first big question to ask and answer is what we're going to do with the rotation. Longoria and Street are set at 1-2. Gonzalez, we're going to see what he can do at the age of 36 as our third starter again after we exercise that option to bring him back. So the question is, Arroyo, Smith, and Valadez. Valadez is pretty well established at this point. He was 13-4 last season, even though we did move him out of the rotation towards the end of the year to give Arroyo and others some opportunities. But he's going to make the team. Arroyo was a disaster when we brought him up last year, 0-3 with a 7.20 ERA. But he doesn't look like he's got anything left to prove in AAA. In his performance down there last year, 14-10, 222 strikeouts, 3.67 ERA. I just don't see any point in keeping him in AAA. So we're going to send Devin Smith down for the time being. I think he's probably ready. He was 14-9 with a 3.24 ERA and 253 strikeouts, so even better. He doesn't throw quite as hard. He's a finesse pitcher, another great personality. But we're basically going to kind of defer the decision on who our 5 starters are going to be to manipulate Devin Smith's service time over the next month or so. So we potentially have him a year behind Arroyo in terms of his major league service and his arbitration years. And he'll be 2 years behind Sal Valadez in terms of those things. And we may be able to get the extra almost full season out of him. So kind of weaselly, but we're the Pirates. We got to do what we can do. So we're going to send Smith down to AAA for at least a little while, which makes it easy to come up with our 5-man rotation. Now we just need to figure out who the last 3 or 4 cuts are going to be. And we do, with a few exceptions, still have very good stamina people throughout our pitching staff, not just in the starting rotation, but also in the bullpen. So I think the goal is going to be to come up with a 12-man pitching staff again this year and go with 14 position players. So we likely have 4 cuts ahead of us. And a couple of the cuts are pretty easy. Luis Molina is a veteran now at 31 years old. Before he had some significant injuries, thought that he was going to be a big part of the Pirates' rotation maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. It's never really materialized. He's just organizational depth at this point, but wanted to at least give him a opportunity to participate in spring training. Lan Fang Kui, another guy who we picked up a little over a year ago from the Dodgers, spent the year in AAA for us last year. Solid, respectable arm, but a 33-year-old veteran, not a guy who's going to be on the major league roster unless we have some injuries. And the last one of the easy cuts is Alfredo Servin, who we picked up in that trade. I can't even remember what trade that was at this point. They all kind of go together. The Rojas trade. Okay, so yeah, he's the guy we got back when we dumped Rojas's contract and got some cash back in return. Think he could be a pretty useful pitcher. He's never pitched above Double-A though, so, and he's only 23 years old. Still has minor league options, obviously. So we're going to send Servin down to Triple-A and see what he can do there. So those were the 3 easy cuts, get us to 13 players. Now the last one is going to be a little more intense. And it's going to come down to a couple of rookies. We're going to keep Danny Robles, who along with Mike Wright is one of only 2 left-handed arms in our bullpen, to go with the lefties Street and Gonzalez in the rotation. So then it comes down to a couple of youngsters, Mike Ceballos and Chris Colvin, and they actually have pretty similar profiles. Ceballos was a guy we picked in the 8th round back in 2042. Good personality, 22-year-old, throws in the mid-90s, good stuff, acceptable movement and control. Hasn't pitched above Double-A ball, but he was reasonably effective there last year with a 3.90 ERA. And then Chris Colvin, guy who we picked in the 6th round last year out of Cal State Fullerton, rapidly moved him up through the system, 10 innings in A-ball, 6 in Double-A, and then 15 in Triple-A, where he was really effective, allowing 7 hits, 7 walks over those 15 innings, 1.20 ERA. Similar profile, good stuff, a little better movement, acceptable control. Still has some growth potentially and improvement potentially in all of his pitches, his fastball, his sinker, his slider, and his changeup. Our scouts think could all get better, which could ultimately result in better stuff for him. Ground ball pitcher who throws in the mid to high 90s. I think that Colvin's got a little more potential, so we're going to keep him up for now. Ceballos, unlike Colvin, has never been above Double-A. So we will send Ceballos down to AAA Indianapolis. And we're going to start the year with Colvin. As I mentioned, I don't think it's going to be too long until Devin Smith is back. He really has nothing left to prove in AAA. He's down there purely to have him spend 3 or 4 weeks down there and hopefully get us another year of team control for him. So if we have injuries, Smith will be up. If we have ineffectiveness, Smith will be up eventually, and it is conceivable that if everyone's pitching pretty well, that Colvin may ultimately be splitting this year between the majors and AAA if we need to make spot on the team for Smith at some point, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because quite honestly that would allow us to potentially manipulate Colvin's service time at the major league level also this year if he spends a month or so in the minors. Less critical to do with a reliever who's probably never going to be making huge money like a potential top line starter would do. But I like the 12 pitchers we've got. We've talked about the starters a lot. Gaylord in the bullpen. Well, let's just see how Vasquez shifts people around before we really talk through them. Gaylord back as our closer. Bin Daoud and Astorga, guys who could start in a pinch, as our setup men. Mike Wright and Colvin as our middle relievers. Ethan Mingo is the long reliever, and Robles is our lefty specialist. So would love to have a third lefty out of the pen, but with 2 lefties in the rotation, hopefully we can match up with lefty righties as far as our pitching staff effectively with the group that we've got. So feeling good about our pitching staff. Now we just need to figure out how to get 23 position players down to 16. And the easy decision is catcher. At catcher, Coronel is obviously going to be our starter. We've been playing Rodriguez against lefties just to get him some pretty consistent at-bats. But those two are obviously our catchers. Nasberg goes back to AAA, and Quiroz, who we signed in arbitration this year to bring him back, does have that one option year left. So unfortunately for Mario, he's going to be spending another year in AAA unless we have some injuries. Rodriguez, our backup, is normal injury proneness. Our new starting catcher, who we traded for, Coronel, is now considered to be an Iron Man. I think he only looked like he was durable based on the scouting we knew before. So probably not going to be too many opportunities for Quiroz to come back, but we'll see what happens. Another relatively easy cut, Dave Casanova. Good glove, not much of a bat. I think we still have a year or two of options. There are 3 option years with him, actually. He hasn't been on the major league roster or the 40-man as long as I thought. So Casanova's going down to AAA. Dave Cintrone, 33-year-old utility guy. Nice organizational depth to have, but easy to cut him, send him down to AAA. Similar I Sing Chu, 27-year-old, good personality, nice, respectable defensive player, can hit enough that he could be a utility guy eventually at the major league level, but pretty easy to send him down right now. And Jonathan Thompson, 25-year-old outfielder, has spent the last couple years in AAA. Decent bat, has some speed, not a horrible fifth outfielder, but fortunately for us, we've got higher quality than him to potentially be our fifth outfielder, I think, even with the injury to Mr. Nakahara that's going to keep him out for another week or so. So Thompson also headed down to the minors, back to AAA. And that leaves us with 3 more cuts to make to get to 14 position players. Jerry Rivera, the third baseman, is a guy we really like. Still has a little improvement potentially in contact, gap power, home run power, and his eye also. He also, granted, I think we talked about this earlier, hit 348 in AAA last year, but it was only over 21 games. I also want to keep working on his defensive versatility. I think he's got a big role to play with this team down the line, but he's another guy who we're going to give a little more seasoning in AAA and also manipulate his service time a bit before we bring him back up. But it is very conceivable that he could be in a starting role for us, potentially like as a starting third baseman over Bobby Guzman, who's really good defensively, but potentially may not be as good a bat down the line. But just for right now, I think we are going to send him down for the time being. And with sending down Rivera, that means that we're going to keep up Jaden Ford. He's a 33-year-old utility infielder. He does have pretty extensive major league service. He's wrecked physically at this point, but he can play second, third, and short at a competent level. He's got a good personality. Did hit 346 and 214 at-bats for us in AAA last year. He's kind of the guy, when we traded away Ethan Fox, kind of figured that we would end up keeping Ford up until Rivera is available and ready. That may not be very long, but I don't see him being a guy who's going to get a ton of playing time given the quality we have in our infield. But we are going to keep him up simply because of his defensive versatility. He's going to keep that seat warm, I think, for Rivera for a month or two, and then hopefully Rivera will be up. We are going to send Ricky Caldera down, 26-year-old first baseman. Just doesn't bring a ton with the bat. He's okay. hit 252 with 10 homers and 404 at-bats in AAA last year. But he's not going to get much playing time here at the major league level. And he's just not a huge prospect. I honestly don't care all that much if he gets a ton of playing time at the AAA level either, as opposed to the majors. But don't think he's a big-time part of the present or the future for the team, so no reason to keep him around. David Green's going to make the team, and right now we're kind of looking at what manager Jan Vasquez wants to do in terms of the lineup. I may overrule him on a couple things. Still may consider getting Zelaya out of first base into a DH role, just to keep him healthier. And also potentially have better defense at first base with Green. But Green was pretty useful for us last year with the injuries to Flores. Led the league with 48 doubles, hit 300 for us in his first full major league season, and he finished third in the Rookie of the Year voting. So we want to ensure that he's getting some regular playing time. So he's going to stick around. Ford's going to stick around. Calez is going to stick around. So with the fact that we do have Nakahara on the IL, basically leaves us with a decision between Joel Fields and Jaden Godfrey, because we are going to keep up Julio Castillo, number 18 prospect in baseball. Did not hit at all with us last year, but he hit 261 with 26 homers in AAA. He's got the type of bat that we need in our lineup. Incredibly versatile, can play first, second, and short in the infield, and he could play third if we trained him there. Actually, third, I think, is his one weakness. I didn't realize we were looking at the defensive ratings for the outfield, but can play any outfield position. Also, looking at the infield, his arm is kind of his weakness. That's why we haven't trained him up at third, but think that he can play a pretty important role for us. Right now, he's slotted in as a left fielder against both lefties and righties. I don't think that's ultimately what we're going to do with him. We're going to be changing this lineup that Vasquez has, but Castillo's going to make the team. So the last cut is going to be Joel Fields or Jaden Godfrey. Fields, we've talked about him, was not great at the major league level for us last year. 5 homers and 183 at-bats with a .224 batting average. Great personality, still has some growth, but doesn't have a lot left to prove in AAA after hitting .295 with 20 homers in 2045, .309 with 17 homers last year. Jaden Godfrey is a guy who was our first-round pick back in 2040. Hasn't been above AA. Definitely ready for AAA. Interesting player, good contact hitter, tons of speed, great defensively. Think he's got a role with us in the future, but we are going to get him regular playing time in AAA this year. So we're going to send him down. That gives us the 14 players who are going to make our team. As I talked about, we'll probably be tweaking this lineup a bit. I think Castillo's got more value as a potential infielder for us. I don't know that I want Zelaya playing in the field every day, given that he's just not that great defensively. Henry Gonzalez is listed as our DH now. Maybe he ends up playing a little more outfield. So I'm going to tweak Vasquez's lineup, but we do have the 26-man roster for these Pittsburgh Pirates set as we exit spring training here in 2047. And in our next episode, we'll check in on the predictions for the season, let you know what we decided to do as far as what those lineups will look like, and get the new year underway. Be interesting to see when we run the preseason predictions in our next episode, what they're expecting from the Pirates. But I feel like this is the best Pirates team we've ever put together. I like a lot of the defensive versatility, still love the pitching, like a lot of the young players like Julio Castillo, Joel Fields, Danny Calez, David Green, who are going to be on the team, like that we've improved at catcher, like that we've got another left-handed bat with Zelaya, like the fact that we're going to have another left-handed bat with Nakahara. I think this is the best team we've ever put together in the 10-year now history of being general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And we will find out whether that is true or not in our next episode when we begin the 2047 season. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.